The bread was still warm when she set it down on the stone ledge outside the dungeon gate, the steam curling up through the iron bars like a question nobody had thought to ask. Elara wiped flour from her knuckles onto her apron, the same apron she wore 16 hours a day in the pack's communal kitchen, where she scrubbed pots and kneaded dough and pretended not to hear the other Omegas whispering that she smelled like yeast and loneliness. Behind the gate, something massive shifted in the dark. She heard the scrape of claws on wet stone, then the low, broken sound of breathing that hadn't been easy for a long time. She had no idea that the creature dragging itself toward her bread was Kyle Ashenmere, Alpha King of the Iron Veil Pack, ruler of 6 territories, the most feared wolf on the continent. But the listeners know, so let us watch. Kyle pressed his muzzle against the cold iron and breathed in. Rye bread, black caraway seeds, and beneath that, something worse, something devastating. Lavender and warm skin, and the particular sweetness of an Omega who had no idea what she was worth. His wolf whined before he could stop it, a sound so pathetic that if his beta commander Ronan had heard it, the man would have resigned on principle. He had been locked in this dungeon for 11 days. His own dungeon, technically, in the lowest level of his own fortress, because the coup attempt by 3 of his council lords had been better planned than he wanted to admit. They had used ashroot chains, the one compound that suppressed an alpha's ability to shift, and they had paid his dungeon keeper to lose the key. His wolf form had returned 2 days ago, when the chains finally corroded through, but by then he was too starved and too weak to break the gate. He had been planning to die with dignity, which mostly meant lying still and thinking about tax reform. Then the bread came. The first night, he had ignored it. An Alpha King does not eat scraps left by strangers. The second night, he ate it so fast he nearly choked, and his wolf had licked the stone where crumbs had fallen, and whatever dignity remained was a memory. Now it was the 11th night, and the bread was the only reason his heart was still beating. She knelt down. He could see her through the bars. Brown hair pulled back with a strip of torn linen. Hands red and cracked from hot water. Eyes the color of river stones after rain, grey with flecks of something stubborn. "I brought you extra tonight," she whispered, pushing a second piece through the gap at the bottom of the gate. "I hid it under my skirt during the kitchen inspection. Do not tell anyone. Not that you can tell anyone, because you are a wolf. But still," she paused. "Also, I brought the bone broth again. I know you pretended you did not like it last time, but you drank it all when I turned around. So let us not insult each other's intelligence." His wolf made the pathetic sound again. Kyle, the man inside, thought very clearly. I will destroy whoever made her hands look like that. And then I need to stop coming back to this gate. I will find another way out. He had already identified 3 other potential exits. He had chosen to stay near this one. He had no explanation for that. None that he was willing to examine. Elara settled onto the ground with her back against the wall beside the gate, the way she did every night now, and began to talk. She talked the way people talk when they believe no one important is listening, which is to say, she told the truth. "They moved me off bread duty today. Head cook Marin said my loaves were too dense. They are not too dense. She has been angry at me since I accidentally used her personal salt crock. She keeps it on the 3rd shelf, wrapped in blue cloth, as if salt is a personality trait." She sighed. "So now I am on root vegetables. 12 hours of peeling turnips. My thumbs are going to fall off." She held up her hands, and in the dim torchlight from the corridor behind her, He could see the fresh cuts across her fingertips, layered over older ones that had scarred white. His wolf pressed harder against the gate. The iron groaned. "Easy," she murmured, reaching through the bars without hesitation and placing her palm flat on his muzzle. "Easy, big one. I am fine. I have had worse." The fact that this was obviously true made it worse. Her fingers found the ridge of scar tissue behind his left ear, where the ashroot chains had burned through his fur, and she scratched gently. His eyes closed. A sound rumbled out of him that was not a growl and not a whine. It was something he had never made before in either form. If he had to name it, and he refused to, he would have called it relief. "You are very large for a stray," she said thoughtfully, "and your fur is black, which is unusual. Most wolves around Ironvale are grey or brown. You look like someone important." She laughed at her own joke. He did not find it funny, because it was not a joke. "Probably you belonged to someone before you ended up in here. I know how that feels." Her voice shifted, dropping to the register people use when they are talking to themselves and have simply forgotten to stop. "I belonged to the Thornfield Pack before they dissolved. My parents died in the border wars when I was 9. The pack kept me because Omegas are useful. When Thornfield fell, I was traded to Ironvale as part of a labor agreement. Not sold, technically. Traded. There is apparently a difference. I have never understood what it is." She said this without self-pity, which was the part that nearly broke him. She said it the way someone describes the weather, because to her, it was the weather. It was simply the climate she had always lived in. Kyle pressed his nose into her palm and breathed her in again. Lavender. Bread. The faintest trace of bone broth. And under everything, the warm, living scent of an Omega, whose body did not know it was starving because it had never known anything else. His wolf thought. Mine. His human mind thought. Absolutely not. He intended to leave that night. He had identified a drainage tunnel on the east wall that he could widen with 3 days of digging. He would escape, retake his throne, execute the traitors, and forget about the kitchen Omega who talked to wolves about turnips. He did not leave. He told himself it was because the broth had not fully restored his strength. This was a lie, and his wolf knew it, and his wolf was insufferably smug about it. The next morning, Kyle finally broke through the drainage tunnel. Not because he had gotten stronger, but because Elara had not come at her usual time the previous night, and the panic that seized him was so violent it cracked 2 of his own teeth against the stone before he realized what he was doing. He dug with a fury that had nothing to do with thrones or councils or territory. He emerged into the forest behind the fortress, covered in mud and tunnel water, shaking and thin, his black fur matted with filth. The morning air hit him like a wall of cold glass. Pine resin and frost and the distant smoke of the kitchen chimneys. He found Ronan within the hour. His beta commander had been leading a quiet resistance from a hunting cabin 3 miles north, and when Kyle limped out of the tree line in wolf form, Ronan dropped the rabbit he was skinning and said very calmly, "My king, you smell like a sewer." Kyle shifted. The transformation hurt more than usual, his body protesting 11 days of starvation, and when he stood in human form for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, he swayed. Ronan caught his arm. "The Council Lords," Kale said. His voice was raw. "Drustan, Fenwick, and Hale. They hold the fortress? They told the pack you abdicated, left for the eastern territories. Most do not believe it, but without you present, belief is irrelevant. I need 3 days. Gather the loyal guard. We retake the fortress on the new moon." "Understood." Ronan paused. You should eat and bathe, in that order. There is an Omega in the kitchen, Elara. Find out if she is safe." Ronan's eyebrows rose approximately 1 millimeter, which for Ronan was equivalent to falling out of a chair. "The kitchen Omega. She fed me through the dungeon gate, every night. She did not know who I was, and you want to know if she is safe." "I want to know if she is safe right now, Ronan." Ronan studied his king for a moment. He had served Kael for 12 years. He had seen the man fight 6 border wars, execute a traitor with his bare hands, and negotiate a treaty with the southern Pax while bleeding from a wound that would have killed a lesser Alpha. He had never seen this particular expression on Kael's face. It looked, if Ronan was being honest, like a man who had swallowed something important and could not get it back up. "I will send someone," Ronan said. "Send yourself. My king, I am your military commander, not a—" "Ronan." Ronan went. He returned 2 hours later with a report that was militarily precise and personally uncomfortable. The Omega Elara was alive. She had been moved from kitchen duty to laundry after head cook Maren reported her for stealing bread. She was currently washing linens in the east courtyard, which was open to the wind and approximately 4 degrees above freezing. Her hands were, in Ronan's professional assessment, in poor condition. She had been seen talking to a stray cat behind the laundry building, and the cat appeared to be winning the conversation. "She talks to animals," Kael said. "So it would seem. She is going to talk to me. My king." Kael was already shifting. This was the part he would never be able to explain to anyone, including himself, especially himself. He had his throne to reclaim. He had traitors to punish. He had 6 territories of wolves waiting for leadership. And instead of spending every waking hour on military strategy, he was trotting through the forest toward the east courtyard of his own fortress in wolf form. Because an Omega who peeled turnips for a living had scratched behind his ear, and he could not stop thinking about it. His wolf was delighted. His wolf had been waiting for this exact scenario, and was practically vibrating with a smugness that Kael found deeply undignified. He found her behind the laundry building, exactly where Ronan had said. She was sitting on an overturned bucket, wringing out a bedsheet, and the stray cat was sitting on the sheet, which was not helping. Her fingers were pruned and raw. There was a bruise on her left forearm that had not been there 2 nights ago. His wolf growled. She looked up. Her eyes went wide, and then bewilderingly. Her face broke into a smile so immediate and unguarded that it hit him somewhere in the chest like a fist. You got out." She dropped the sheet. The cat fell off with an indignant yowl. "I came to the gate last night and you were gone, and I thought maybe you had—" She stopped, swallowed. And then she did something that no living creature had done to Kael Ashenmere in his entire adult life. She walked straight up to him, knelt in the frost-bitten grass, wrapped her arms around his neck, and held on. She smelled like lye soap and cold water, and beneath that, lavender. Always lavender. Her heart was beating fast against his fur, and she was shaking, and he realized with a start that she had been afraid for him, for the stray wolf in the dungeon. She had been afraid he was dead. "Do not ever do that again," she whispered into his fur. "Do not ever just disappear." He had conquered armies. He had held the line at the siege of Blackmere when his own father fell. He had never once, in all of that, felt the particular sensation of someone being afraid to lose him. Not afraid to lose their king, or their alpha, or their military advantage. Afraid to lose him. His wolf settled against her, and did not move, and Kael let it happen, because fighting it would have required a strength he no longer possessed. That was the first day of the double life. He told himself it was reconnaissance. He was living in the forest, planning his coup, and it was strategically useful to visit the fortress in wolf form. He could observe troop movements, monitor the council lords, gather intelligence. He gathered no intelligence. He gathered exactly 0 intelligence, because every time he entered the fortress grounds, he went directly to wherever Elara was and sat down next to her, and did not move until she scratched behind his ears. Ronan noticed. Of course Ronan noticed. "You went to see the kitchen Omega again," Ronan said on the 3rd evening, examining a map of the fortress guard rotations. "Laundry Omega." She was transferred. "You went to see the laundry Omega again." "I was conducting surveillance. You came back with a ribbon tied around your ear." Kael reached up to his human ear. The ribbon was gone, but the memory of Elara tying it there while laughing, saying he needed to be more festive, remained with a clarity that was almost painful. "She is eccentric. She tied a ribbon on a wild wolf and you let her. It seemed unwise to bite the person who feeds me. You have access to the entire camp's food supply. I roasted a deer yesterday. Her bread is better." Ronan set down the map. "My king, with absolute respect, you are behaving like a complete fool." "Noted. Show me the west wall rotations." The next day, Kael went back. He told himself it would be the last time. He told himself this every day. It was never true, and his wolf had stopped pretending to believe it, and the small, honest part of Kael's human mind had stopped pretending too. The escalation was gradual, and then it was not gradual at all. The first incident was the blanket. Elara had been sleeping in the laundry room on a pallet made of folded sheets, and the room was unheated, and she had been coughing for 2 days. Kael, in wolf form, had watched her curl into herself in the cold, and had felt something inside his chest crack along a fault line he did not know existed. That night, he stole a fur-lined blanket from the officers' quarters. He carried it in his teeth through the service corridors, dropped it outside her door, and scratched once. She opened the door, looked down at the blanket, looked at the enormous black wolf sitting in the hallway with an expression of studied nonchalance, and said, "Did you steal this?" He looked away, deliberately. "You stole a military-grade officer's blanket and brought it to me." He licked his paw. "You are the strangest wolf I have ever met, and I love you for it." The word hit him like a physical blow. She did not mean it the way his wolf received it. She meant it the way humans say they love coffee or sunshine or a particularly good nap. But his wolf did not understand context, and his wolf filed the word away in whatever primal vault wolves keep their most important information, right next to her scent and the exact pressure of her fingers behind his ear. The second incident was the bath. He had not planned it. He had been rolling in the creek to clean off mud, and she had found him, and she had said, with the calm authority of someone who has spent her life caring for things that cannot care for themselves, "That creek water is filthy. Come with me." She led him to the laundry room after hours, filled the largest wash tub with heated water, and pointed at it. He stared at her. "Get in," she said. An alpha king does not take baths in a laundry tub. An alpha king got in the laundry tub. She washed him with the same lye soap she used on the sheets, working her fingers through his fur with a thoroughness that was completely professional and absolutely devastating. She found every scar, every knot, every place where the ash root chains had burned his skin beneath the fur. She was careful with each one. Not gentle in the way of someone who is afraid of hurting, but careful in the way of someone who has been hurt and knows exactly where it lives. "You have been through something terrible," she murmured, tracing the burn scar behind his ear. "I do not know what, but I can feel it. You carry it in your body." He closed his eyes and let the water hold him, and let her hands hold the rest, and the traitorous thought surfaced again, the one he had been drowning for days. What if I never go back to being king? What if I stay here? What if this is enough? It was not enough. He knew that. But in the warm water with her fingers in his fur, it felt like everything. The third incident was the bed. She had nightmares. He learned this on the 6th night, when he was sleeping outside her door, a habit he had developed and refused to categorize, and he heard her cry out. Not a scream, a sound much worse than a scream. The small, choked noise of someone who has learned to be afraid quietly. He pushed the door open with his nose. She was tangled in the stolen blanket, her face wet, her hands clenched. She was saying a name he did not recognize. "Pera! Pera! Run! Run!" He crossed the room and pressed his body against the side of her pallet. She woke with a gasp, saw him, and for a moment her eyes were what? Then her hand found his fur, and she exhaled, a shuddering breath that came from somewhere deep and old. "Bad dream," she said. Unnecessary explanation. She knew he could not understand, but he did understand. He understood more than she could imagine. She lay back down. Her hand stayed in his fur. And then, without either of them deciding it, he was on the pallet beside her, his massive wolf body curving around hers like a question mark. And she was pressed against his chest, and her breathing slowed, and his breathing matched hers. And they slept. They slept better than either of them had slept in years. He woke before dawn, with her head tucked under his chin, and her fingers still wound into the fur at his throat, and the absolute certainty that he was in catastrophic trouble. He extricated himself with the surgical precision of a military extraction, slipped out the door, and ran to the forest camp, where he shifted and stood in human form in the cold morning air, and said out loud to no one, "This cannot continue." It continued. The fourth incident was the shirt. Elara did laundry. This was her job. Among the items she laundered were the training uniforms of the Fortress Guard, and among those uniforms, before the coup, had been the personal shirts of the Alpha King. These had been packed away after his supposed abdication. But Kael, operating on a level of strategic thinking that he would later describe as temporary insanity, retrieved one of his own shirts from the stored linens, rubbed it against his wolf body until it was convincingly dirty, and dropped it at Elara's feet. She picked it up, frowned, held it to her nose. "This smells like—" She trailed off, her cheeks colored. "Where did you get this?" He sat down and offered his most innocent expression. His wolf was laughing. His wolf had been laughing for days. "This is an Alpha's shirt, a powerful one." She pressed it to her face again and breathed in, and the sound she made was small and involuntary, and it set every nerve in his body on fire. Oh, this is... She looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at the ceiling. "You stole the Alpha King's shirt." He could not nod. He could not speak. He could only sit there and watch this woman hold his shirt to her face and breathe him in, and want, with every cell of his being, to be in that shirt while she did it. She kept the shirt. She slept in it. He knew this because he slept beside her every night now, and the scent of his own body mixed with hers was a combination so intoxicating that his wolf had essentially stopped cooperating with any plan that did not involve being within 3 feet of her at all times. Ronan staged an intervention. "My king, the new moon is in 5 days. We have 40 loyal guards, a detailed infiltration plan, and a 3-hour window when the traitor's forces change watch. This is what we have been planning for 2 weeks. And you?" Ronan paused. "You just came back with soap in your fur." "I fell in a stream." "That is lavender soap. That is omega soap. You smell like a garden." "The stream ran through a garden." There are no gardens in the northern forest. Ronan, my king, I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear it as your friend and not your subordinate. Ronan sat down on a fallen log and looked at his king with an expression of genuine concern. Are you mate-bonded to this woman? The silence lasted 4 seconds too long. No, Kael said. Your pupils just dilated. It is dark out. We are standing next to a campfire. I am not mate-bonded. I am strategically invested in an intelligence asset. You are sneaking into a laundry room every night in wolf form to cuddle an omega who thinks you are a stray. That is a reductive characterization. It is an accurate one. Kael said nothing. The fire cracked. An owl called somewhere in the trees. 2 low notes and a silence. When the fortress is retaken, Ronan said carefully, what happens to her? Kael had been avoiding this question the way one avoids a loose tooth. The answer, if he was honest, was that he had no idea. He was the Alpha King. She was a pack laborer, without rank, without family, without status. The council, even a non-treasonous council, would never approve a mating bond with someone who peeled turnips for a living. There were diplomatic alliances to consider, bloodline expectations, the endless machinery of pack politics that treated marriages like trade agreements and love like an inconvenience. She will be provided for, he said. Ronan looked at him. The way a man looks at a bridge he suspects is not structurally sound. Provided for. She will be safe. She will be comfortable. She will never wash another sheet. But she will not be yours. She was never mine. His wolf howled inside him, a sound of such raw objection that Kael physically flinched. Ronan saw it. Ronan saw everything, which was why he was an excellent beta and an extremely inconvenient friend. 5 days, Ronan said. Focus. Kael focused for approximately 4 hours, after which he shifted and went back to the laundry room, where Elara was sitting on her pallet wearing his shirt, reading a water-damaged novel she had found in the discard pile, and she looked up when he pushed through the door and said, There you are. I saved you some soup. It is terrible soup. Head cook Maren made it, and she puts too much salt in everything because she keeps her salt in a special crock, like it is a holy artifact. She poured the soup into a chipped bowl and set it on the floor. It was, in fact, terrible soup. He drank every drop. She sat beside him and pulled the blanket around both of them and opened her book, and she read aloud to him, because she had started doing this 3 nights ago, and it had become, without discussion, part of whatever this was. The book was a romance about a human woman and a sea captain, and it was objectively terrible writing, and she read it with absolute sincerity, doing different voices for each character, and he lay with his head on her thigh and listened to every word and thought. I will burn this kingdom to the ground before I let anyone take this from me. The next day, everything changed. Kael was in his human form at the forest camp, reviewing the infiltration plan with Ronan, when the scout arrived. The scout was breathless, his face tight with something that was not quite panic, but lived in the same neighborhood. Lord Drostan has announced a claiming ceremony, the scout said. 3 days from now, he intends to take an Omega from the Pack's labor force as his mate, to legitimize his position. Kael's blood went cold. Which Omega? The scout swallowed. The one who works in the laundry. Elara. The silence that followed was so dense, it had weight. Ronan took 1 step back from his king, which was the most alarmed Ronan had ever been in his life. No. He cannot claim her, Kael said. His voice was very quiet. This was worse than shouting. Everyone in the camp knew it. He has the Pack's seal. With the council behind him, the ceremony would be binding under Pack law. Pack law requires the Omega's consent. Since when has Drostan cared about consent? Kael's hands were shaking. Not with fear, with something much more dangerous. The mate bond he had denied, the one he had told Ronan did not exist, was ripping through every wall he had built around it. His wolf was not asking permission anymore. His wolf was telling him, in the ancient, wordless language of the bond, that their mate was in danger, and the response was not strategic, and the response was not political, and the response was immediate. "We move tonight," Kyle said. "My king, the plan requires. We move tonight or I go alone." Ronan looked at his king. He looked at the man's hands, the tendons standing out like cables, the knuckles white. He looked at his eyes, which were no longer entirely human. And Ronan, who had served 12 years and survived 6 wars, did the only reasonable thing. "Tonight," he agreed. But first, Kyle had to warn her. He had to see her. Not as a strategic decision, as a need so fundamental it operated below the level of thought, like breathing, like heartbeat, like the tide. He shifted and ran. He found her in the east courtyard. She was not alone. Lord Drustan was standing over her. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with a face that might have been handsome if cruelty had not settled into it, like water into stone. He was holding her wrist, not tightly, not yet, but with the casual ownership of someone who considers grip a form of communication. "You should be honored," Drustan was saying. "An omega of your status, chosen by a lord of the council. Most would weep with gratitude." "I am not most," Elara said. Her voice was steady. Her wrist was not. "You will learn to be." Kyle came out of the tree line at full speed. Drustan saw the wolf too late. 200 pounds of black fury hit him in the chest and drove him backward into the courtyard wall with a crack that might have been stone or might have been bone. Kyle's jaws closed on the air an inch from Drustan's throat, a warning that was almost not a warning, and the growl that came out of him was so deep it vibrated in the stones beneath their feet. Drustan, to his credit, or perhaps to his discredit, did not scream. He went very still. His eyes moved from the wolf's teeth to the wolf's eyes, and something in those yellow-gold eyes must have registered, because Drustan's face changed, not to fear, to recognition. "That is not a stray," Drustan whispered. Elara was pressed against the opposite wall, her hand over her mouth. "Please do not hurt him. He is mine. He is my wolf. Please." "My wolf." The words landed in Kyle's chest and detonated. He released Drustan, stepped back. The Lord scrambled to his feet and ran, actually ran, and Kyle let him go because the alternative was killing him in front of Elara, and some part of him, the human part, understood that she should not have to see that. She was at his side in a breath, her hands in his fur, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did he hurt you? That was so stupid, you stupid, brave, wonderful wolf. He could have killed you. He is a lord and they kill strays. You cannot just—" She was crying, not from fear, from the particular anguish of someone who has already lost everything they loved and felt, for one terrible moment that it was happening again. He pressed his forehead against hers. Her tears fell into his fur. "Pera was my sister," she said, and he went still, because the name from her nightmare was suddenly here, in the daylight, real. "She was younger than me. When Thornfield fell, they separated us. They sent her north with the labor convoy, and I never found her. I looked for 3 years. I wrote letters that came back unopened. She was 12, and she was scared, and I promised her I would find her, and I failed." She pulled back and looked into his eyes. "I cannot lose you too. Do you understand? I know you are a wolf, and you do not understand words, but I need you to hear this. You are the only one who comes back." She buried her face in his neck and held on, and Kael stood in the courtyard of his own fortress, in the body of a wolf, and made a decision that would reshape 6 territories. She was his. Not because the bond demanded it, not because his wolf insisted. Because she was standing in the cold in a stolen shirt, and she had chosen him, the worst version of him, the version with no name and no crown, and she was afraid to lose him, and no one in his entire life had ever been afraid to lose him without also being afraid of him. He would take back his throne. He would claim her, and he would find Pera. That night, while Elara slept with her hand in his fur, he slipped away for the last time. He shifted in the forest and dressed in the armor Ronan had prepared. 40 wolves, the loyal guard, stood in formation in the clearing. Torchlight caught their eyes, amber and gold in the dark. No unnecessary casualties, Kael said. The servants are innocent. The kitchen staff, the laborers, do not touch them. Drustan, Fenwick, and Hale. I want alive. The rest of their guard will be given one chance to submit. And if they do not? Ronan asked. Kael's eyes caught the torchlight. Then they do not. The battle for Ironvale Fortress lasted 47 minutes. It was not, by historical standards, much of a battle. Drustan's hired guards fought with the enthusiasm of men who had been paid and not inspired, and when the Alpha King walked through the main gate in full shift, black fur and burning eyes and a presence that pressed against the walls like a thunderstorm. Most of them simply knelt. Drustan did not kneel. He fought, and when he was pinned, bleeding, on the floor of the great hall, he looked up at Kael, who had shifted back to human form, and said something unexpected. She reminds me of someone. Kael, who had been preparing to pronounce sentence, paused. My daughter, Drustan said. His voice was different now, quieter. The cruelty had drained out of his face and left behind something older and more broken. She died in the border wars, same year as Thornfield. She was an Omega too. Sweet. Too sweet for this world. He coughed, blood on his lips. I was not trying to hurt the girl. I was trying to... I thought if I claimed her, I could protect someone the way I did not protect. He stopped. Whatever he had been about to say dissolved into the blood and the silence. Kael looked at the man on the floor. He saw, for one brief and uncomfortable moment, not a traitor, but a father who had broken in a particular way and could not find the shape he had been before. It did not change what Drustan had done. It did not earn forgiveness. But it complicated the hatred, and Kael filed that complication away in the part of himself that would have to govern justly when the anger faded. Exile, Kael said, not execution. Beyond the southern border, if you return, there will be no second judgment. Drustan closed his eyes. Whether in relief or despair was impossible to tell. Fenwick and Hale were less complicated. They had acted from ambition, not grief, and their sentences reflected it. Stripped of rank, imprisoned, their lands redistributed. The pack would go on. By dawn, the fortress was his again. The Alpha King stood in the great hall with blood on his armor and his kingdom restored. And he felt nothing. Not triumph, not relief, not satisfaction. He felt the absence of a hand in his fur and the memory of a voice reading bad romance novels. And he felt a need so sharp it had edges. He also felt profoundly stupid, because he now had to tell a woman who thought he was a stray wolf that he was actually her king, and that every night she had spent sleeping beside him, confiding in him, bathing him, tying ribbons on his ears. She had been doing it to the most powerful alpha on the continent. This was not going to go well. He found her at mid-morning. The fortress was buzzing with the news of the king's return, and the servants were moving through the corridors in a state of cautious celebration, and Elara was standing in the east courtyard, looking for her wolf. He watched her from the colonnade. She was calling for him, the wordless whistle she used, and turning in slow circles, and her face was doing the thing it did when she was trying not to be afraid. The set of the jaw, the steadiness of the eyes, the slight tremor in the hands that she hid by pressing them against her thighs. "He is not coming," she whispered. Kael stepped out of the colonnade. She saw him and went very still. Everyone in the fortress had been told the king had returned, but she had never met the king. She had arrived during his imprisonment. To her, he was a stranger, a tall stranger with dark hair and gold eyes, and a scar behind his left ear that she could not see, but would recognize by touch. "You are looking for something," he said. "My wolf." She said it without embarrassment, which was one of the things he loved about her, this refusal to be ashamed of caring. "He is large and black, and he has a scar behind his left ear, and he is very badly behaved, and I need to find him because there was fighting last night, and I am afraid." "He is safe," she blinked. "You know him?" "Better than anyone." Something flickered across her face. Not understanding. Not yet. But the beginning of a question. "The bread," Kael said. "Through the dungeon gate. Black caraway seeds. You used your own flour ration." The color drained from her face. "The blanket," he said. "The officer's blanket that the wolf brought you. I know where he got it because the officer filed a complaint." She shook her head. One small movement, side to side. Not denial. Computation. "The shirt," he said, and his voice dropped, and the space between them felt like the space between a match and a wick. "My shirt. The one you sleep in. The one that smells like—" "Stop!" He stopped. She was staring at him. Her Riverstone eyes were wide and very bright, and her hands were pressed flat against her thighs, and she was shaking, visibly shaking, and she said in a voice that was careful and precise and barely holding, "Show me." He could have argued. He could have explained first, could have softened it with context and justification. But she had asked to be shown, not told, and she deserved that respect. He shifted. The transformation took 3 seconds. One moment he was a man in blood-stained armor, and then the air bent around him like heat off summer stone. And then the wolf was there, the enormous black wolf with the scar behind his left ear, sitting in the courtyard, looking at her. She made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound of something breaking and something else clicking into place. 2 sounds at once, destruction and construction, and they cancelled each other out and left silence. She walked forward, slowly. She reached out and touched the scar behind his ear, the one she had found in the dark of the dungeon, and her fingers trembled against his fur, and she whispered, "It was you, the whole time." He shifted back. Her hand was on his neck now, the human neck, and his skin burned where she touched him, and his eyes were gold, and hers were grey, and neither of them moved. "The bath," she said. "Yes." "The bed." "Yes." "You heard everything I said, about Thornfield, about Pera, about—" "Everything?" She hit him, open palm against his chest, not hard enough to hurt, hard enough to mean it. "I told you things I have never told anyone. I cried in front of you. I read you a terrible book about a sea captain, and I did voices. I did different voices, and you were the Alpha King the entire time." The sea captain voice was very good. "Do not make me laugh right now. I am furious with you. You should be." "I am. You have every right to be." "I know I do. I do not need your permission to be angry." She hit him again. Same spot. Same force. You let me think you were astray. You let me worry about you. I stole bread for you. I used my flour ration. Do you know what that cost me? Maren docked my meals for a week. The laughter died in his eyes. She docked your meals? That is not the point. It is very much the point. She will not dock anything again. Stop being protective. I am yelling at you. You can yell at me, and I can be protective. Both things can happen. She opened her mouth, closed it. Her hand was still on his chest, flat against the armor plate. And beneath her palm, she could feel his heartbeat, fast and steady and real. And it was the same heartbeat she had felt through black fur on a pallet in the laundry room, while a bad dream faded and the world shrank to the size of a warm body beside her. You should have told me, she said. Quieter now. I know. Why did you not tell me? He looked at her. Not as a king, not as a wolf, as the man who had eaten soup off a floor and slept on a pallet and let someone tie a ribbon on his ear, because her laugh was the only sound that made the world feel habitable. Because you talked to me like I was no one, he said, and no one has ever talked to me like that. Everyone talks to the king. Everyone talks to the alpha. You talked to the wolf, and the wolf is the truest part of me, and you liked him. You chose him. And I was terrified that if you knew, you would stop. She was quiet for a long time. The courtyard was empty except for them, and the morning light, and the distant sound of the kitchen staff beginning breakfast, pots and water, and the familiar rhythm of bread being shaped. The wolf who stole the blanket, she said finally. Me. The wolf who brought the terrible stolen shirt, also me. The wolf who growled at Lord Drustan and nearly bit his face off, enthusiastically me. The wolf who slept in my bed every night and let me read to him about a sea captain named Fernando. Fernando was a compelling character. She almost smiled. He saw it, the ghost of it, at the corner of her mouth, and he would have given every territory he owned to see it land. You do not get to decide what I can handle, she said. You do not get to decide that the truth is too big for me. I have survived things that would break an alpha, and I did it without a pack and without a family and without anyone. And you do not get to look at me and see someone who needs to be protected from the truth. I know. Say it like you mean it. I know. I was wrong. I was selfish, and I was scared, and I was wrong. She studied his face the way she had studied the scar behind his ear. Carefully, with the attention of someone who knows where pain lives. Then she stepped back. One step. Distance that felt like miles. I need time, she said. You will have it. I need to be angry for a while. You will have that too. And I need you to find my sister. Something shifted in his chest. Not the bond. Something older. Something that had nothing to do with wolves or mates or kingdoms. A promise made by one person to another, as simple and binding as bread through a dungeon gate. I will find her, he said. She nodded once. Then she turned and walked back into the fortress, and she did not look back. And he let her go, because she had asked for space, and he would give her space even if it killed him. And it might. And his wolf was howling, and he stood in the courtyard alone and understood for the first time that love is not the moment you find someone, but the moment you let them choose whether to stay. 3 days passed. They were the longest days of his reign, including the 11 in the dungeon. Elara did not come to him. She did not avoid him either. She simply existed in the fortress as she always had, doing her work, talking to the stray cat, eating meals in the kitchen. She had been moved back to bread duty by the new head cook, a quiet beta woman named Sela, who did not treat salt like a sacrament, and the bread coming out of the kitchen was, by universal agreement, the best the fortress had ever seen. Kael ate the bread. He ate every piece that came to his table. Ronan watched him do this, with an expression that suggested the beta commander was composing a very long letter to someone about the mental health of their king. On the second day, Kael's intelligence network found a lead on Pera. A labor convoy record from the northern settlement of Greymarch listed a young Omega, age 12 at intake, transferred from Thornfield Pack. The record was 7 years old, but Greymarch was a small settlement, and people in small settlements remember. On the third day, Kael received confirmation. Pera was alive. She was 20 years old. She worked as a record keeper in Greymarch's archive building. She had been looking for her sister too, sending letters to every pack in the region, letters that had been intercepted by pack bureaucracy and filed in cabinets that no one opened. Kael sent a rider with a royal escort. Not to bring Pera back, to bring her an invitation. And a letter from Elara, because he had gone to Elara with the news, and she had looked at him with an expression he could not read. And then she had sat down at the laundry room table and written a letter with a hand that shook so badly the words slanted across the page like rain in wind. She had not thanked him. She had not fallen into his arms. She had written the letter and handed it to him and said, "If this is real and she is safe, then I need to see her before I can think about anything else." He understood this. He understood that the sister was not a bargaining chip and not a grand gesture, and that if he treated it as either, he would lose her in a way no kingdom could fix. Pera arrived 6 days later. She had Elara's eyes. Kael was not present for the reunion. He had planned to be present, had positioned himself in the great hall where the meeting was scheduled, and then at the last moment he shifted and left through a side door, because some things are not for kings. Some things are only for sisters. He heard about it later from Sela, the new head cook, who had watched through the kitchen window. They held on to each other and did not speak for a long time, Sela said. Then the younger one said, "Your bread still smells the same." And then they both laughed and cried, and I had to go stir the soup because I was making a mess of myself. The night after Pera arrived, Kael was in his study reviewing border reports when the door opened. He had not heard a knock. He looked up, and Elara was standing there in his stolen shirt, which she had apparently washed and ironed and continued to wear. And her eyes were red from crying and bright from something else. "You found her," she said. "I told you I would. You kept your word. I intend to keep doing that." She crossed the room. She walked the way she always walked, direct and unhesitating, the way of someone who has never had the luxury of indecision. She stopped in front of his desk and placed both hands on it, and leaned forward and said, "I am still angry. I know, but I am also something else, and I do not have a word for it, and you are going to have to be patient with me while I figure out what it is. I have time. You are a king. Kings do not have time. I will make time. I will cancel things. Ronan will be furious." The ghost smile came back. This time it landed. "Your wolf," she said. "Is he in there right now? He has been unbearable for 3 days. He believes we are dying. Tell him we are not dying. He does not listen to me. He only listens to you." She reached across the desk and placed her hand on his jaw, and his eyes closed, and the sound that came out of him was the same sound from the dungeon, the one that was not a growl and not a whine, the one he still refused to name, but which they both knew was the sound of something too big for a chest to hold. "I choose you," she said. "Not the king, not the wolf, the man who was scared enough to hide and honest enough to stop. I choose all of it." He turned his face into her palm and breathed. Lavender and bread and the faint chemical tang of lye soap, the scent he would know at the end of the world. 2 days later, the pack gathered in the great hall. Every wolf, every beta, every omega. The kitchen staff stood along the east wall. The guard lined the west. Ronan stood at the king's right hand, with an expression that was, for the first time in 12 years, something approaching genuine happiness. Kyle stood before his people. Beside him, Elara. She was not dressed in finery, because she had refused finery. She wore a clean version of her kitchen clothes and the Alpha King's shirt underneath, visible at the collar. Because she said if she was going to be queen, she was going to be a queen who had done laundry and was not ashamed of it. Pera stood in the front row, holding the hand of the stray cat, which she had picked up and was now cradling against her chest, because, apparently, the inability to leave things uncared for was genetic. Kyle spoke. This woman came to the dungeon gate every night. She brought bread. She brought broth. She brought the only kindness I have known in this fortress that was not purchased or obligated or performed for advantage. She did not know I was her king. She knew only that something behind the bars was hungry, and she fed it. He paused. The hall was silent. I have conquered territories. I have held borders. I have done the work of a king, and I have done it well. But I was starving. I did not know I was starving until she fed me, and the thing she fed was not my body. He turned to Elara. His voice, which had filled the hall, dropped to a register meant for one person. She is mine. Not because I claim her. Because she chose me at my lowest, and she stayed angry long enough to make sure I deserved it, and she let me come back. That is not a claim. That is a gift. He looked out at the hall. His eyes found every face. His voice returned to the register of kings. She is your queen. The hall erupted. Not with the polite applause of political arrangement, with the roar of a pack that had watched its king walk through fire and come out the other side smelling like lavender soap, and found this, somehow, to be the most reassuring thing that had ever happened to their kingdom. Later, when the hall was empty and the torches were burning low, Elara sat on the throne. Not because anyone told her to, because the stray cat had jumped onto it, and she had sat down to retrieve the cat, and then stayed because the chair was, in her words, surprisingly comfortable for something so ugly. Kyle shifted. The black wolf walked across the empty hall, his claws clicking on the stone, and climbed the dais and laid his head on her lap. She looked down at him. Her fingers found the scar behind his ear. I am going to read to you, she said. I found the next book in the Fernando series. He becomes a pirate in this one. It is going to be terrible. She opened the book. The wolf closed his eyes. And in the great hall of Iron Vale Fortress, in the amber light of dying torches, the queen read aloud in different voices, and the king listened, and the bread was rising in the kitchen below them, warm and steady, the way some things simply are.